is the fourth or fifth Endangered Places happy hour that we've done for CPI, and I appreciate all of you participating today. It's a wonderful story that we have to share with you. It's a story that's 130 years old, and there have been many twists and turns along the way. More recently, it's taken some really new and promising turns, so it's a pleasure to share it all with you today. In the larger context of the Endangered Places Program, Temple Aaron was listed in 2017, and you will hear today from some people about how that all came about. But there are now 127 sites on Colorado's most endangered places list. And of those, 50 have been considered saved, 47 are in progress or working towards a save, and another 25 are on alert status, which the newly listed ones each year go on that status as well. And then 7 sites have been lost over the 23 years of the program, working with communities across Colorado. So it's not just a static list, but it's really a programmatic approach to working with communities to save these kinds of important sites. And we're not standing still. Nominations are being accepted for the 2021 listing to Colorado's Endangered Places Program. If you have a threatened or endangered property in your community or your region, please consider nominating it. And if you need to visit with me about it along the way, I'd be glad to talk with you about your nomination. And so with that, we're going to take you on a little 130-year journey. And Neil Paul will kick it off and talk a little bit about how he got involved with the effort to save the temple. And then David London, another board member, will talk about efforts to save the temple and how he got involved in some of the legal and other challenges along the way. And then Ron and Randy Rubin will share stories of, can everybody hear me? I lost my video. Oop.
We can hear you.
Okay, Ron and Randy Rubin will talk a little bit about growing up at the temple and life cycle events that took place, and living as Jews in Raton, New Mexico, in the Trinidad area. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the architecture of the building, and Sherry Connect will also tell us a lot about our outreach efforts and social media and Facebook and efforts to promote our work. So with that, I'd like, and then we'll all address questions that you might have at the very end. So Neil, if you'd like to chime in now, tell us a little bit about your involvement and how you got.
Right. Thank you, Kim. Let me pull this up, and hopefully this is showing up okay.
It looks great. Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you. Well, again, my name is Neil Paul. I became involved in this in 2016. I had originally, actually, let me just go through here as we go through the slides, and I'll explain my involvement. That's me on the left, and then Randy is in the back row as you're looking at it, to my right, and then Kim, David coming around, Ron, Ruben, and then Sherry. That was at a recent Rosh Hashanah service in front of the temple. It's me. My involvement started in 2016. I heard about it. I heard about the efforts to try to save the temple, or the fact that, not to try to save the temple, but the fact that the temple was closing. It was a CPR program. I was on the way to work. It was definitely a kick in the gut to hear that the oldest continuously operating synagogue could not afford to stay open. Later found out they were asking $395,000 for it. David brought it to, I used to be on a board with the B'nai B'rith, Denver, B'nai B'rith, Colorado. He brought it to the attention of the board. They chose to go one direction with it, which was not get involved. I chose to get involved. That's when we just started to increase our fundraising efforts. Really quickly, for those who have not been in Trinidad, the very top of the map, you can see Denver, the very bottom, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Trinidad is right in the middle, right halfway, 180 miles south of Denver. It does have a Tesla charging station. So for those of you that want a nice ride down, it's a beautiful ride down in Trinidad. It's a small town, very inclusive, very open, very friendly town. This is up in a third floor window out of the synagogue. Just a fun small town atmosphere, and there's really good energy. By the way, a lot of investors have chosen to put some money into the town of Trinidad. So for those who are looking for a nice place to get away, once I went and saw the inside of the temple and the outside, it just really grabbed a hold of me. I've never personally been in the synagogue with a pipe organ. The story of that was very interesting, and just the whole beauty of the building. It just seemed like something that should not be let go. Just for information, the photo on the left is the original boiler, now 131 years old. However, the new boiler, which was replaced, you know what, honestly, I don't remember, 30 years ago or something, the new boiler needs to be replaced. The building, for its age, it's in great shape, but it needs work. And that's what we're trying to do, is just maintain a building. Really, the number of Jews in a town, you can count on one hand. There are very few Jews, if any, in this town of Trinidad. So if we're going to save it, it's going to take the efforts of Jews elsewhere, or just people around, anyone who has an interest in a historic element, regardless whether it's a religious element or not. It's a beautiful building that should be saved. In the whole event of getting involved and putting together, these four ladies, not sure what happened there. Did everything go away?
See if
The
we can get it back.
PowerPoint went away, but we can still see your screen.
Okay.
Oh,
There
here
we
we're
go.
back.
These four ladies met one another, and they are all related to two of the people on the cornerstone of the temple. So were it not for our efforts to kind of trying to find some support for the temple, these ladies would not have met. And again, they're all kin. So I'm going to just move forward and let David, let me see, this stopped. Oh, okay, there we go. I'll let David start, and David, go for it.
Sure. Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Kim. I'll just tell the story of how I got involved and how our relatively recent efforts to save the temple have grown, and I think it's just a great little story about the power of just a handful of people and their partners to try to do something great. So a bit of background: the temple the congregation was formed in 1883, and the building was built in 1889. And for generations, there was a wonderful, small, and active Jewish community in Trinidad. And the last family that really maintained that community and maintained the temple was the Reuben family, Ron and Randy, the current generation, and their mother, Catherine, of blessed memory, who passed away in 2018 at the age of 95. And I always say that one of the best things about my getting involved was the ability to know her and become her friend. Very special, very special woman. So in 2016, Ron and Randy, facing dwindling funds and an almost non-existent congregation, as Neil said, they decided to close the temple. They put the building up for sale. There was a front page article about it in the Denver Post. And I have an aunt, I live in Boulder, and I have an aunt who lives here, and she cut out the article and she sent it to me, and I read it, also like Neil, very sad to hear about it. I had been to the outside of the building once. I'd never been inside. And the article described what had happened, and it mentioned Randy Rubin's name. Randy lives in Raton, New Mexico, and I had never met him, but I knew that I knew people who knew him through other contacts and friends that I have in New Mexico through the New Mexico Jewish Historical Society. So I contacted one of my friends that I knew him and said, please give me Randy's phone number. I'm going to call him. So I called him, and it was a cold call. He didn't know me from Adam. We chatted for about an hour, and we just decided that if there was anything that any of us could do, we were going to try to do it. From there, I spoke briefly with B'nai B'rith Denver, and that's how I met Neil. And in the early 2017, we put a little working group together consisting of Neil and Sherry and Ron and Randy and Kim, and we just started to try to raise awareness and talk to people and do some fundraising, and that's what we've done over the last few years. And we've raised well over $100,000 at this point, so we have a good operating fund. We still need much more to make the repairs that the building needs, and that's where we are here in 2020. And a couple of interesting points. I'm an attorney. I don't know if there are any other attorneys on the phone, but when we started this, we knew we had to have a nice, good ownership and fundraising platform for the temple. So I did a little research, and at that time, the temple was owned by an entity called Congregation Aaron, an unincorporated religious association, like literally dating back to 1889, and there were no records of it at Colorado's Secretary of State or otherwise. So we knew we had to sort of bring the ownership of the building into the 21st century. So we worked closely with a local title company, and we drew up some affidavits that proved that the Rubin family had been operating the temple for the last 30 years. There was nobody else. And the title company then recorded a deed from this unincorporated association of the 19th century to a brand new Colorado nonprofit corporation that we formed in 2017 called Temple Aaron of Trinidad, Colorado. So it's now owned by a totally up-to-date corporation. We worked for a couple of years to get that corporation its own 501c3 status. We have that for about a year now. And so we have a good, we have a very current and transparent platform for the building's ownership and to raise money on. And then the connection to CPI is also worth mentioning. CPI holds a historic preservation easement on this building and has for years, which means that they have to approve, CPI has to approve of any changes to the exterior of the building. And Kim was our contact with CPI, so he was just a real natural to join our board and sort of be able to help us in our relationship with CPI, which has been really wonderful. So that's just how things have been running for the last few years as we've tried to save the temple. As Neil has said, there really is you really can't say there's a Jewish community in Trinidad anymore. There are a handful of Jews in town, but we have what we call a virtual congregation from Boulder down to Albuquerque with a lot of supporters. And until COVID, we were having several events a year, Rosh Hashanah services, Passover Seder, speakers. We had a wonderful 130th anniversary gala event last summer where we dedicated a historical marker. So we've been quite active in the last couple of years, and we hope to continue the fundraising so the building can be restored. And we really appreciate all of your interest and help. So with that, I will turn it back over to to Kim to introduce Ron and Randy Rubin.
Okay, thank you, David. Ron and Randy, I don't know who wants to go first, but who's ever ready, just jump right in.
If it's possible, is that okay with you, Randy, if I go first? Even though you're my older and wiser brother. First, I would like to, there we are. First, I would like to truly thank Kim and Neil, and we'll hear from Sherry and David for their brief introduction of Congregation Aaron and how it's been maintained, and its founding in 1889, at least for the building. And it does our hearts proud to know that others have taken an interest and saved us from the brink of selling it. I had contacted a real estate agent here and put it up for sale, and we had a couple of interests. But then in our greatest hour of need, Neil and Sherry and Kim and David came through and helped us take down the sign for sale and to keep it moving. I wanted to tell you a little bit about, since my brother and I are the only link to Temple Aaron, having grown up there and still on the board, I just would like to tell you a little bit about what it was like growing up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s at Temple Aaron, and tell you more about it, what it was like for our parents and for the other Jews in Raton and Trinidad. First, let me just say our parents felt, Catherine and Leon Rubin, felt it was very important to keep us as Jewish as possible. We were the only Jewish family in Raton for many of the years when we were growing up. So they wanted to try to do as much as they could to make sure that we were Jewish. And there are my wonderful parents. So many times we would go to Santa Fe, Colorado Springs, Denver, Pueblo, Albuquerque for Jewish life, for BBYO and AZA and dances and getaways. And so that's how they kept us involved for the years growing up. But when we were young, we did have a Sunday school, and there were about 8 to maybe, I don't think there were ever 15, but 8 to 12 of us at various times. And we had our little Sunday school for about 5 years. And Randy and I would go over to Trinidad to Temple Aaron, and we would have Sunday school and celebrate Purim, have Purim spiels, and have a great time with the other Jews and the other Jewish children who were there. And so we always had all of our Jewish holidays at Temple Aaron, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hanukkah, Passover, and we had a wonderful time with the other Jewish families. When we were at the age for our bar mitzvah, our parents had, there I am at my bar mitzvah, before I had this beard. We went to Albuquerque to study with a man by the name of Rabbi Scheinling, Abraham Scheinling, and we stayed with our aunt and uncle, our mother's sister's family for the summer, and he was a tough teacher. We learned Hebrew as much as we could for our Torah portions. We read Genesis. I wrote my Torah portion. Then I came back in August. Randy had the same experience 2 years before I did. And then our bar mitzvahs were both born in September, 2 years apart. We had our bar mitzvahs in September. So mine was the last Jewish celebration, I would say, for about 30 years. Randy's daughter and son, Nina and Ben, had theirs. And the last one now has been probably 25 years ago for that as well. We had many luminaries from mainly the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati who came to the temple and were there throughout the years. Probably the most important one was Jacob Rader Marcus. And this is a picture of him. And he was, he's highly, highly esteemed. By the way, the picture that's up now, those are the people with whom we grew up. And we know most of those people. I'm sure my brother could name more than I could. But the woman on the far right is B. Sanders, and she had control of the temple and did, yes, as much as she could for around 30 years. And the people in the lower left-hand corner, those are our parents, Leon and Catherine Rubin. And so we grew up with a lot of much older people when we were growing up. So they were all aunts and uncles, and they showered us with kindness and with generosity and with delicious food every time we were in their homes. But Jacob Rader Marcus was the president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis in 1949, and the first Hebrew Union College professor since Isaac Mayer Wise to be so honored. And he was truly a man of great intelligence, wrote many, many books, and he was the first to devote himself fully to the scholarly study of American Jews through the American Jewish Archives, which he founded in 1947, and through many, many books. This is one of his books, which was called The Rise and Destiny of the German Jew, and it is with the most cordial best wishes to my parents, Jacob Rader Marcus. So he was great. Another one who came through was a man by the name of Alexander Schindler, and he was, this is just if you want to see what his name is. He was the second president of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. So we had people who came to Trinidad who were highly esteemed within the Reform Jewish movement. And I might say that Temple Aaron was from its founding was of Reform Judaism. And it was sort of unusual at the time in the mid-1800s because the Reform movement was just getting started in America in the mid-1800s, and ours had women and men who were equal at Temple Aaron and within the Reformed Jewish movement. So let me tell you a little bit about the communities in Raton and Trinidad, and that will shed much light on us growing up. As I said, we were the only Jewish family for many of our early years in Raton. And I don't know if Randy felt this way, but I felt very different. We got dressed up at odd times at school, and kids would say, "Why are you all dressed up today?" And it would usually be for Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. And I'd say, "Oh, well, you know, our parents have a clothing business, and they just like us to dress up at various times." The town of Raton was probably 75 or 80% Catholic. And so, so they couldn't understand why we were getting dressed up. So I, for one, and Randy can tell you how he felt, I would sort of make a joke of it and just say that our parents liked us to dress up. I didn't tell many of our friends that I was Jewish. I didn't particularly want to be too different at the time. And even many years later, many of them didn't even know we were not like them, that we weren't Christian, but that we were Jewish. Beyond that, our Jewish community in Trinidad was wonderful, as I said. They were successful business people. One couple owned a shoe store in Trinidad, the Seibols. One couple owned a department store, Albert and Rita Moses. One couple was in the insurance business, and that was Mr. Gottlieb. And many of them lived to be well over 100 years old. So with my mom living to be 95, our father to be 92, we expect to have longevity being members of Temple Aaron. And so I think Kim and Neil and Sherry and David being members of Temple Aaron, that will give you at least 10 extra years of life.
All right. Sounds good.
So
Thank you.
our mother took over the reins of Temple Aaron when B. Sanders wasn't there anymore, and until she moved to Colorado Springs. And so my brother is now the shamash of Temple Aaron and attending to its every need. So Randy can talk to you about Temple Aaron since childhood 70 years ago. Randy, take it away.
Ron summed things up very nicely, I must say, and brought out some nice things. We had a succession of rabbis, as Ron mentioned, from the Hebrew Union College. Temple Aaron had an endowment, as you probably, well, as some of you may know, and we were closely aligned with the Hebrew Union College, and we would get esteemed rabbis as well as students, and student rabbis, I should say. And so we always had high holy days. And one of the interesting things about the High Holy Days. Obviously, they go on for 10 days. Many of the rabbis, including Rabbi Marcus, Rabbi Schwartzman, Rabbi Schindler, Rabbi Cook, would stay in the area, and my mother and father would entertain them and show them around to Taos, Santa Fe, other places in Colorado that were close by. And we became friendly with these rabbis. I would assume they tolerated Ron and myself. We were, as Ron mentioned, much younger than the majority of the congregation. And some of our congregants spoke with accents. They'd come over from Germany. And I don't remember, Ron, where Yetta and Luke came from. I don't know if they were Polish, but it was an interesting mixture because some of them were, if you might say, fresh off the boat and successful at what they were doing. And we had a woman who was a music teacher in the Trinidad school, so she always kind of ramrodded the choir. As Ron said, we're a Reformed congregation, so we had a choir and that organ. It's an Etsy organ. Am I saying that right, Ron? Etsy organ. And it was shipped in 1922. Those pipes that you see are decorative. They're not hooked up to any of the bellows or anything else. They surround the inner workings, and they're behind that. Although we've had many people think that those are gold or brass, they're a lightweight metal painted. And if any of you are ever interested, be happy to take you behind. It's like pulling back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz. You can see those magnificent pipes are decorative. The other memory that my brother has, and I'm sure I know I do, Ron does, is during Kol Nidre, is being sent outside and getting to play football on the lawn on the south side. We were the only two kids. And when Ron said they were much older, we're talking a generation or more. And it was somewhat awkward at times. When we did have Sunday school, I remember Sunday school, and there were some other children there. Stan Biber had 2 or 3. Dr. Barglow had 4. But it was, I guess, I don't know if lonely is the word, but certainly isolating to be a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. And my brother is 2 years younger than I. So we were the only kids there. And Ron said they doted on us somewhat, and we were expected to maintain decorum, which I think we did to a large extent. As children, you get a little antsy, to say the least. And we were allowed, as I said, to go out and play football and take our ties off. We were always dressed up in shirt and ties. As Ron mentioned or certainly alluded to, our parents had a clothing store, so we always had sport coats and shirts and ties on and dress shoes. But we got to kind of peel those off. And as you can see to the left of the picture, there's a grassy area. That was great fun to get to play football and release a little energy. It was quite a time, and we did have a number of people sitting in the pews. And oddly enough, they were never full, but everybody seemed to sit every year for the same holidays in the same places. I think Ron would echo that. And it was somewhat odd that the Sanders, or B. Sanders, I should say, but she sat on the pulpit, the Seibels, the Gottliebs, the Moses, Edith Tauf's mother, everybody, it was just odd. There was never a lack of room, but everybody felt comfortable in a certain pew. They weren't assigned by any means. And it was always curious to me. And we would always get visitors from the community and some passing through that would join us for the high holidays. So it was exciting. And as Ron said, a bit off-putting to go to school in a shirt and tie and then leave at 9:30 in the morning and be gone the rest of the day. And kids, you'd come back the next day and say, what was wrong? Were you sick? What's going on? Well, what do you say to your fellow classmates? Well, I'm Jewish and we had the high holy days. when you're 11 years old or 13 years old, and as Ron said, the town was 80 or 85% Catholic, it's an awkward thing. We never felt any riches, or I certainly never felt any, or things such as that growing up, but it was awkward in the sense that we're Jews. Well, how do you say that to other kids? I'm not sure that people knew what Jewish folks were or even are to this day in our little town. There's a higher awareness, certainly, but we're talking early 60s, mid 60s. It wasn't known. The original rabbi was there from 1889 to 1916. Yes, I'm jumping around. Rabbi Leopold Freudenthal, and he was there till his death in 1916. There was a rabbi previous to him, but his name is hard to find, and he's not talked about. He was there for a year and a half, and it's kind of interesting that he is kind of lost. I guess Freudenthal had by far and away the greater influence. Those are the Freudenthal tombstones in the Jewish cemetery. And we do have a cemetery. And a number of years ago, it was incorporated into the Masonic cemetery. Our parents are both buried there, as well as a sibling. So that's our cemetery. And it's usually a little greener than that, but we're suffering with a drought. This is taken in the winter, I would assume.
16, I think. Yeah, 17.
And that's obviously, many of you know of Stanley Biber, quite famous for his pioneering work in sex work. I shouldn't say sex work. That's his regendering of folks, I guess you might say.
Assignment.
Sex reassignment.
Getting better.
Yes, it is getting better. And I want to echo something that Ron said. Thanks to David London, Neil Paul, Sherry Connect, Kim Grant, and of course my brother, I don't know where we'd be today. And I say that with great emphasis. The energy, the wherewithal has been brought in because of them. It was a miserable time putting up that sign, to think that, what are we going to do? Is it going to be an office building? Is it going to be a B&B? Is it going to be a wedding chapel? These are all things that were suggested. Even the district attorney got in on it, called me and said, we'd like to turn this into our offices and maintain the sanctuary as a sanctuary. You would have free reign to use it when you needed. The thought of that was, I'll just say, it was overwhelming to think, wait a minute, this history ends now? What goes on? Well, thanks to the people mentioned, it didn't and hasn't and won't. And I say that,
Randy, too, when you're done.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Along those lines, there was a front page article in the Denver Post, and the Intermountain Jewish News also covered it. And then when Neil and Kim and David and Sherry got involved, and we started raising money because these people felt that it should be saved, there was this article on September 7th, 2018, Historic synagogue saved for now. And it says the Rubin family, a Colorado nonprofit, and the city of Trinidad joined forces. And it says community rallies to the rescue. And so you can see a picture of our mother. You can see a picture of Kim Grant. There's a picture of me. There's a picture of Neil. And then here's a picture. I just wanted to show you this too. Temple Aaron, Forever Jewish.
He's not.
Randy Rubin, Mom would be smiling now knowing the temple is going forward. And that's, there's a picture of Randy. The only person that didn't make it into the article was David. But so the goal, of course, is Temple Aaron Forever Jewish. And it was a big deal in the Intermountain Jewish News when the temple was saved. So this will always have huge meaning for us to have this article that says community rallies to the rescue and historic synagogue saved for now. Go
May I
ahead.
say, may I say something else? I want to give kudos to Neil. He has paved a lot of roads for Temple Aaron with the city of Trinidad. He's made numerous phone calls. We're on very good terms with the city. We're on very good terms with the city, and we're on their radar. And that's been a very important aspect of this as things proceed. And they realize the historic significance as well as the significance to the community. The Jewish leaders who initially instigated the congregation in B'nai B'rith were leaders who happened to be Jewish within the community. The first mayor or board president was Sam Jaffa, and made a significant contribution to the organization of Trinidad. So our history has been significant. I say the Jewish history of Trinidad. And if you look at those names, Jaffa, Sanders, Raskover, many of them were merchants. I don't know about Eibman, the Gottliebs. What was very interesting too growing up, the descendants of those original, and I would say men, the women were important, of course, but they didn't get their name on the
Cornerstone.
On the plaque. Unfortunately, were well esteemed within the business community and had stores and insurance agencies, things such as that. I want to mention the Hebrew Ladies Aid Society. They worked very hard getting things together, and we have a board in the temple that's divided up. I don't know what it was used for. We haven't established that, but they did a lot of fundraising to raise funds. It was around $12,000 to build that in 1889. And I don't know if Kim mentioned this, but we've been told it's an exotic Moorish revival style. I love seeing those words. I'm not sure I can define them, but maybe, did I say Neil? Excuse me. Kim can define those. I don't know if there's any questions you all have of Ron or myself,
Well,
but
let me move on.
it was an experience growing up in Raton. And I don't remember, as I said, having any untoward things said to me or even demonstrated. In later life, I heard things were said when I was an adult in terms of some service clubs, but growing up, no.
Thank you, Randy. This is Kim, and if it's okay, I'll jump right in.
Sure.
Dude,
And then Sherry will wrap things up, and then we'll entertain some questions from people. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the architecture of the temple. As has been mentioned, it was built in 1889. It was designed by Isaac Hamilton Rapp in the exotic revival style. There's Mr. Rapp there. And in the late 1890s through the early 1900s, the exotic revival style was popularized. It was based on styles in like Egyptian revival, Moorish revival, and other Turkish elements, things from the Levant or the Middle East. And a lot of movie houses adapted this style, and a few religious institutions, mostly mosques and some synagogues and temples. And by the way, the use of the word temple is usually referred to a Reform Jewish congregation, but not always. But either whatever you call it is a synagogue. And there are a handful of these exotic revival synagogues around the country. And Temple Aaron is truly unique, being west of the Mississippi. So let's take a look at the building for a little bit. If you notice, it has kind of a symmetrical facade, and there are two towers. On the south, there's a pyramidal tower, a tower topped by a pyramidal shape. And then on the north, there is an onion dome, which is, again, a Turkish feature, or a feature from the Middle East, crafted out of metal a long, long time ago. It's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. At the moment, there's about a 2-foot hole in that, so that's something we need to address as soon as possible. The building is red brick with quarried stone that was quarried in the area. There are stone lintels under the windows and different decorative elements. If you go to that very first large frontal image of the temple, there are the towers. There's a large front porch and a pretty good significant sized roof on the porch. But if you look at the elements on the facade of the building, for example, the minaret shaped elements on the far left and in the middle, the tops look like minarets, but they also look like Torah finials, or the tops of a Torah scroll. And so in the middle there is the painted white metal, and that sort of mimics Torah scroll, or even a Torah pointer, a yod, which is used to read the Torah. And then a couple other elements. There's a close-up of the onion dome, if you go to the next slide. And then, oops. Below that, I lost my images. Sorry, folks.
Do you see that, Kim?
There we go. And then if you go to the view of the side of the building, slide 38, you can see that there are 12 vertical windows that relate to 12 tribes of Israel, and some interesting decorative brickwork in between. So it's a really majestic building. It sits way up high on a hill overlooking the community, and you know, has really stood the test of time. But it needs a lot of work, and we are currently focusing on the roof and trying to get funding for the roof. The roof is a very complex structure with many peaks and valleys to it, and it's the background to my screen that I'm talking from is a close-up of the pressed metal roof patterning behind my head there, which also kind of mimics the pyramidal shaped tower. And so those are sheets of metal that are stamped with that pattern to it that will have to be repaired or replicated when we get to that point. So that's a little bit about the architecture. Just to wrap up, I should reiterate that Isaac Hamilton Rapp was a really significant architect in the region. He designed over 80 buildings in Trinidad alone, including 3 notable churches and some school buildings, and later was created or credited with the creation of the Santa Fe style of architecture. If you've ever spent much time in Santa Fe, you'll know there are a lot of adobe and stucco buildings, and kind of based on the territorial adobe precedents. And Hamilton Rapp had a lot to do with popularizing that style, which is sort of institutionalized in Santa Fe. You sort of have to build in it now. So that's one of the many claims to fame. But he was a very prolific architect, and he certainly left us with a majestic temple on the hill there at 3rd Street and Maple in Trinidad. And with that, I'll let Sherry talk a little bit about all the wonderful events that have happened. We've talked a lot about how things kind of dwindled and participation was dwindling over time, but there's a whole great new energy associated with the temple as we try to build kind of a regional congregation from Boulder to Santa Fe and beyond. And we've had participants at our events from New York, from Israel, and from all over the region. So Sherry, take it away and tell us what we've got going on with the programming and so forth.
Okay. Hi everybody. Well, what Kim said is really, that's really the theme of what's happened over the last few years. So, you know, starting in around 2016, when Neil and David and everybody started working to raise awareness and funds, the first priority was preventing the temple from getting sold, which they did, and they garnered support from a variety of people. They raised funds, both some larger amounts and some smaller amounts, but in any case, so that was sort of a first emergency priority. But then we started holding events. We started holding services and celebrations, like Passover Seders, Rosh Hashanah services. We started doing some fundraising events. This photo was from a tour of abandoned synagogues that we did here in Denver. Phil Goodstein Tyler, some of you may know him. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. He's a local historian and author, and he took us all around Denver, and people enjoyed that trip. These photos are just a few from the celebration that we had last summer. We were celebrating the temple's 130th anniversary. It was a 3-day event. We had so many parts to this. We had Shabbat services. The top left photo is Beth Cohen. She is a cantor who came up from New Mexico. We dedicated the historic marker. So the center photo you see is during the celebration to erect that marker, the historic marker. We also honored the descendants of the original founders of the temple. So that's one of them holding the microphone right there. In the top right corner, Cherie Caro Schwartz was a storyteller. We had all kinds of events that weekend. It was a really wonderful event. And as Kim said, the events have been drawing people from Colorado and New Mexico and beyond. While there are not a lot of Jews in the area, there are some families who have, older ties to the temple. And we just keep hearing they are really grateful that, we've kind of restored, or, we've been reinvigorating the synagogue and using it for events. So of course they're coming, but it's really wonderful to see people coming from farther away as well. This service last September, we don't have regular services every week. We don't have regular office hours. We don't have a permanent rabbi. So we have been blessed to have at least three rabbis who have shown interest and have come and led services. At this service, there are 3 rabbis: Rabbi Bernie Gerson from Denver, Rabbi Robert Lennick, who is the executive director of the Jewish Federation of New Mexico, and Rabbi Shimon Mok, who is a little bit obscured on the left side in that photo. All 3 of them ended up helping to host the services, which was really, really special. This is just during that same weekend, I believe. These photos are from an event we held here in Denver just before COVID closed everything down. This was just this February. We had a fundraising concert at the Mercury Cafe in Denver. Buckstein on the left, and in the top right photo, and Clay Kirkland performed. It was a really good time. We have had to adjust our plans for the spring and summer, of course. One of the things we're planning to do is to show a film called Children of the Inquisition. We had hoped to show it in person. Those plans are tentatively in place, although we may need to switch to an online event or delay it. We're not really sure yet. If you have any interest in our events, I hope you'll check out our website. which is templeaaron.org. We also have Facebook, where we'll keep everybody up to date. I'm trying to think. This is a collage of various photos from various events. I appreciate the opportunity to share about Temple Aaron with you all, and we welcome any questions. We welcome visitors. Even though we don't have open hours, many people will contact us and say, "Hey, we're coming through town. We'd love to see the temple," and if at all possible, one of us, often Randy, will be able to go to the temple and open it up and take people through. So.
Yes, it's again to I guess finish up with Sherry. It's a privilege to be part of this this mitzvah, I guess, and this whole process. And it's been wonderful being a part of helping save the temple, and we surely need much more support and help in the near term and long term. So. Love to have your participation, folks. Thank you.
If folks have some questions, we'd be glad to entertain them we have about 5 minutes left, I believe.
Kim, we do have a question. Are the stained glass windows original? They're beautiful.
Yes, they are. Is Jane Watkins still on the call?
She is.
Jane might want to chime in on that because she knows a lot more about them than I do, but they are original to the building.
Hi all. This is Jane. If you hear me.
Yes, we can.
Phil is sitting here too, and he said he believes they are original to the building. The glass is very, very old.
Hmm.
There have been some replacements here and there from damages, but the original is the original old glass.
It certainly looks that way.
Mm-hmm.
Kim, you noted a whole bunch of different projects that are kind of on your wish list. What are kind of the first things that might happen?
Well, in terms of physical restoration, we need to address the roof. It's critical to do a full investigation of the roof and get emergency repairs made, and then potentially a full replacement of the roof, which will be very costly. There's also work that needs to be done, particularly on the lower roof over the porch, and some repairs for the windows, and also a stone retaining wall that wraps around the site is bulging and needs to be addressed too. So there are a lot of different elements. And another element that we haven't really talked about that unfortunately is a critical issue in the Jewish community these days is security. We need to improve the security of the building for when we have events, and we also need to upgrade the kitchen and provide better accessibility for people with disabilities as well. So it's a long list, and we'll take them one at a time, I guess.
That's probably the only way you can. We also got another question. What's the purpose of the second story? That is kind of unique for a church, for a synagogue.
It is kind of unique to have the sanctuary up there on the second floor. I don't know if the Rubens know how that originally came about. The lower level has some really great spaces that could be adapted for ongoing use, and like a museum, a library, social hall. But the sanctuary is really kind of unique up there on the second floor, for sure.
I think there was a question about grants.
I guess that's how RAP wanted it to be, but I don't know originally.
For folks following along, we've got some links being posted in the chat to get you over to the website and exploring further. Are there other questions? You could unmute yourself if you don't want to type it in.
there's one thing, Amanda, that I did fail to mention, and that is there's an effort to nominate Temple Aaron as a National Historic Landmark. And that process is underway with the help of the National Park Service. It's a very rigorous kind of process. And so we have to be very careful about changes made to the building in order to qualify for that. But that is underway. And part of the case to be made for that is not just the spectacular architecture, but it's rather the story of the westward migration of Jewish people along the Santa Fe Trail and through the railroad to the American Southwest, and how that story unfolded at Temple Aaron in Trinidad. Fascinating, fascinating story.
I think we missed a question. Ariel had asked about whether we're applying for grants for specific projects. And we are, Ariel. We're in the process. We have a grant and application and process right now to the State Historic Fund. And we have received some support from the Jewish Federation of New Mexico and Jewish Colorado as well. And we'll continue to be, working with those organizations and applying for other grants.
May I say something? This is Randy Rubin. Would like to add that the Jewish Federation of New Mexico has been most helpful and lending us support. They need to be recognized very much, as well as Linda and Ed and Goff with the Jewish Historical Society of New Mexico, not only in moral support, but also in monetary support, have been very helpful. It's been pleasant to know that we're on the radar of more than just the immediate area.
Definitely.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. Guys, you're doing such good work down at Temple Aaron. We are so excited to hear all the history and the updates. Thank you all for joining us. You can head over to coloradopreservation.org if you want to nominate another endangered place in Colorado. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Board of Temple Aaron. And I'm going to sign off and close this up. Thank you for joining us.
Amanda, thank you. And thanks
Thank you.
CPI for all
Thank
your
you
help.
very much, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.